I have worked 9 years at Briarfield County Medical Center, and in that time I have seen the hospital do a lot of things to a lot of people. I have watched administrators call it restructuring when they mean we found someone cheaper. I have watched good nurses get walked out of buildings for reasons that had nothing to do with nursing. I had stopped being surprised by any of it. That was my mistake. The morning it started was a Wednesday in November, the kind of gray, still morning where the building feels half empty even when it is not. Director Harlan Pruitt had called the department heads in at 7. I heard about it secondhand, budget consolidation, they were calling it, a phrase that meant nothing and covered everything. By 8 o'clock the word had come down to the surgical floor, the overnight float position was being eliminated, effective immediately. Her name was Clara Dowd. I knew her the way you know someone you pass in a corridor at a shift change, a nod, sometimes a word about the weather or the state of the coffee. She had been covering the overnight surgical floor for going on 3 years. Quiet. She did not say much, did not push for recognition, did not eat lunch in the lounge where the conversations happened. She wore plain navy scrubs and kept her badge flipped inward half the time, which the charge nurses complained about but never wrote up because her charts were always clean and her patients never had a bad outcome they could point to her for. I did not know she was former military. I did not know she was anything except competent and quiet. At 8:15 I was crossing the main corridor when I saw her come out of Pruitt's office. She had a cardboard box in both hands, the standard issue kind, the kind that shows up when a decision has already been made. Security was with her, one guard walking a step behind, the way they do when they've been told to make it official. She was walking at a normal pace. Her face was level. She did not look at anyone in the corridor, not because she was ashamed, I understood later, but because she had already decided there was nothing here that required her reaction. Pruitt followed her out as far as the doorway and said something I did not hear, probably the part about wishing her well. She did not stop walking. I watched her go through the lobby doors and into the gray morning, and then I went back to my office and did the thing I had trained myself to do in 9 years of watching the hospital behave badly, which was nothing. I had a caseload. I had families waiting. I told myself Clara Dowd would land on her feet and I told myself it was not my business, and both of those things were probably true, and none of it made me feel any better. The veteran came in that afternoon. His name was Aaron Griggs, staff sergeant, retired, and he came in through the emergency bay around 2 o'clock with a hunting accident, a fragment wound to the left side of his chest from a misfire at his brother-in-law's property out past the county line. The trauma team worked him for the better part of an hour, and by 4 he was stable and in a room on the surgical floor, the same floor Clara Dowd had covered the night before. I got involved because the trauma team flagged him for a social work consult. He had listed no emergency contact, no insurance beyond a VA card, and the intake nurse noted that he had been agitated coming out of sedation, repeating something she could not make out. Standard protocol. I went up at 5. He was awake when I came in. Big man, 50s, with the kind of stillness that some veterans carry, the kind that is not calm exactly but is something harder than calm. He had an 4 in his left arm and a pulse ox on his finger, and he was staring at the ceiling with the expression of a man working something out. I introduced myself, explained the consult, asked how he was feeling. He said, fine, and then he said, who was the nurse on this floor last night? I told him I wasn't sure I had that information. He said, Dowd. I heard somebody say Dowd at the nurse's station when they were pulling a chart. Clara Dowd. He said it the way you say a name you have said in your head 10,000 times. Is she here? I said I wasn't sure I could discuss staff. He looked at me then, and whatever he saw on my face was enough. He said, she's gone. I told him there had been a personnel change that morning. I kept my voice neutral. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached toward the small tray beside the bed where they'd placed his personal effects in a plastic bag. He worked the bag open with one hand and found his wallet, opened it, and withdrew something from behind his VA card. He held it out to me. It was a dog tag. Not the standard rectangle, but a second tag, the kind that comes on its own short chain, the backup identification that medics carry, worn smooth from years of handling. The name stamped into it read Dowd, CL, and below that, one word, Anchor. She put that in my hand, he said. Told me to hold on to it. Said she needed me to hold on to something solid so she could work. He turned the tag over in his fingers. Helmand Province. 12 years ago. There were 11 of us. I sat down. He told me what happened the way veterans tell things they have told before, not quickly, not with drama, but with a precision that made it more disturbing than drama would have been. A vehicle strike. A secondary blast. 11 men down in a forward area, the nearest surgical support 4 hours away by air and the weather closing in. 1 medic dead in the first blast. 1 junior medic with a broken arm. And Clara Dowd, a staff nurse attached to the forward surgical team, who was not supposed to be forward at all. Her deployment had been flagged for a records error that placed her in a non-deployable category on paper, which meant she had no official business being where she was, which meant that when it was over and the after-action reports were filed, her name fell into a gap. She held us, he said. 4 hours and 11 men, and she did not stop once. I lost a lot of blood. There were 2 others worse than me. She did not lose any of us. He looked at the tag. I have been looking for her for 8 years. I lost the thread twice. And then 6 months ago somebody told me she was nursing up at Briarfield County. He paused. And today I'm here. He looked up at me. Find her, he said. Please. I am a social worker. Finding people is not technically my job. But I went back to my office and I found the number listed in Clara Dowd's personnel file, her cell phone, which she had not yet had reason to change, and I called it. She picked up on the 3rd ring. I told her who I was. I told her there was a veteran in room 414 who had been asking for her by name, who had something of hers that he had been carrying for 12 years. There was a silence on the line. Then she said, "Aaron Griggs." I said yes. She said, "I'll be there in 40 minutes. She was there in 30. What I did not know, what Aaron Griggs had not told me, because there was a phone call happening that I was not part of, was that when I left his room, he had called his former commanding officer. Major Carl Hendricks, retired, who now lived 4 hours south of Briarfield County, had answered on the 2nd ring. Aaron had told him where he was and what had happened that morning. Hendricks had made 3 more calls in the time it took me to find Clara Dowd's number and dial it. I was at the nurse's station on the 2nd floor when the lobby called up. The desk nurse picked up, listened, looked at the phone, looked at me. She said, "There are 8 soldiers in the lobby. In uniform. They're asking for the director." I went down. There were 8 of them, 8 men in army dress blues, standing in the Briarfield County Medical Center lobby on a Wednesday evening in November. Major Hendricks was at the front. He was a composed man, close to 60, with the bearing of someone who had stood at attention in worse places than this. The others ranged from late 30s to mid-50s. They were not loud. They were not making a scene. They were simply standing there, and the lobby had gone completely quiet around them the way a room goes quiet when something has entered it that nobody was prepared for. Pruitt came down from his office. I saw him appear on the mezzanine above the lobby first, looking down, and then he came to the stairs and descended. He had the careful expression of a man trying to determine what category of problem this was before he committed to a response. He got to the lobby floor and Hendricks turned to him and introduced himself by rank and name and said that his unit had a matter of recognition to attend to, and that they would need a few minutes, and that they were grateful for the use of the lobby. Pruitt said something about hospital protocol, visiting hours. Hendricks looked at him with a patience that was not quite polite and said, "Sir, we will not take long." And then Clara Dowd walked through the lobby doors. She had not changed. Navy scrubs, same as always, her badge clipped straight this time, her stethoscope around her neck. She was still carrying herself the way she carried herself in the corridor, not performing anything, not braced for what was coming, just moving at a measured pace like a person who has made up her mind. She stopped when she saw them. Hendricks stepped forward. He reached into his jacket and produced a folded document, a general's letter of commendation, dated 12 years ago and held in administrative suspension by a records error that had been formally corrected 4 months prior. He read it aloud. The lobby did not move. He read the full text: 11 men recovered, 4 hours of sustained care, 2 critical saves without surgical support, valor above and beyond the scope of attached duty. He said her name, her rank from those days, and her call sign, Anchor. When he finished reading, he refolded the letter and held it out to her. She took it. Her hands were steady. Then Major Hendricks stepped back, and all 8 of them raised their hands and saluted her. Aaron Griggs was not in the lobby. He was 4 floors above us in a bed with an 4 in his arm. But he had asked one of the nurses to call him when it started, and I found out later he had the phone pressed to his ear, listening to the silence of that lobby the way you listen to a thing you have been waiting 12 years to hear. I looked up at the mezzanine. Pruitt was still there. He had his hand on the railing and he was watching, and he had the look of a man who had made an accounting error so large that he was still working out the shape of it. He did not come back down. Clara Dowd stood in the lobby of Briarfield County Medical Center with a 12-year-old commendation in her hands and 8 soldiers holding their salute, and she did not say anything for a long moment. Then she nodded, one deliberate, unhurried nod, and she said, quietly, "Thank you for coming." That was all she said. She did not need to say more. I have worked 9 years in this building, and I have learned that institutions do not often account for the value of quiet people. They account for noise and visibility and the ability to fill a room. Clara Dowd had none of those things. She had navy scrubs and clean charts and a dead man's dog tag she had once pressed into a wounded soldier's hand so he would have something to hold. It turned out that was enough to fill a lobby. The letter went into the hospital's record the following morning, along with a formal request from Major Hendricks's office that it be acknowledged in the personnel file. Pruitt reinstated her by the end of the week. He framed it as a correction of process. She came back without comment, pinned her badge straight, and covered the overnight surgical floor as if none of it had happened. I still pass her in the corridor at shift change. We still nod. Sometimes she mentions the weather. But I know what I know now, and I think about it every time I watch someone walk out of an office carrying a box, that a cardboard box is not a verdict, and quiet is not the same as small, and some people are carrying things that the building they work in will never deserve to understand. She was. She is. That is the whole of it.